Hello everyone, and welcome back to yet another one of my motherboard escapades. So, continuing the trend of Skylake and KB Lake overclocking motherboards, here we have the AsRock Z170 OC formula. And basically the reason why I have this is because I wanted to try both the OC formula and the Apex, test out which one's better, which one I like more, then keep the one and sell the other. Because I can't really afford to keep both. Like, the Apex was pretty cheap, this one wasn't. Yeah. So, I'm gonna recoup the cost by selling one of the boards, probably. And, to be honest, it's probably gonna be this one, because I already did some testing on it, and it seems that it's pretty... yeah. The one thing that it has going for it is because that it can do locked CPU overclocking. So I could theoretically overclock this G3900 here in this board. So I might hold on to it for a little bit, but yeah, it would be better if I just sell one of the boards to yeah, recoup some of the cost. Anyway, yeah, let's take a look at the board. I did get a manual with this, but that one was only for the BIOS setup, so sadly I don't have anything that describes all the hardware functions of the board. So when it comes to buttons that we find, I'm just kinda gonna have to guess what they do based on what I can see on the board. But yeah, so first thing, this one's a 4-dimmer. So this one is not a 1-dim per channel motherboard like the Z170X SoC Force LN2 from Gigabyte or the Maximus 9 Apex from Asus. So this one has a little bit of a memory clock disadvantage because, well, for best clocks you want to run 2 sticks. And if you run these 2 sticks in the black slots, the yellow slots are still there, they're still empty, and all the pins inside the yellow slots will produce interference, and that's just that's just bad for signal integrity and therefore your maximum clock that you can achieve. And I've already doing some testing on the LN, like on the SoC Force LN2 and the Apex. I can tell that for memory clock these ones don't go all that high, which is not that big of a surprise. These are more close, like these are closer to the beginning time of DDR4 than to the end. So far the Gigabyte board is doing the best for clocks. Best I could achieve for the Gigabyte was about 3866. With a little bit of BCLK I was able to get around 3900. The Apex, absolute best I could get out of that was 3733. And for this one, 3600. Admittedly, I spent not a lot of time on this one, but better than 3600 I was not able to post on this. So this one so far seems to be the weakest for memory clocks, which I mean is kind of obvious, it's a 4-dimmer. Though the Apex also is kind of weak if you ask me, and the Gigabyte's doing fine, I guess. Yeah. But anyway, let's go look at the VRM first, because that's one of the cool parts about the motherboard. So let's get rid of our heatsink, and we can take a look at the VRM, because oh, I'm gonna need a bigger screwdriver for that. Spring-loaded screws for the VRM heatsink, that's interesting. I guess I can spoil already that this is gonna be the best VRM that we look at yet. Not that it probably makes a big difference. Well, actually, if you run a 9900K completely maxed out, this one's probably just better. This one also has the best output filter, though for CPUs the output filter doesn't seem to do that much. Like, yeah, it does something, but yeah. Oh, that funnel pad looks a bit squished. This motherboard is in much less of a good state than the Apex or the LN2. This one very much was used, and it's kind of filthy in some places. Again, the VRM heatsink is... You're not really seeing a lot of fins on this one. Given that we have a 12 phase here, it's probably fine, but like... That's not how you make a heatsink, guys. That's a modern art piece. At least it has a heat pipe in it, I guess. But yeah, so this VRM is a 12 phase. You might be inclined to just count the inductors and then go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Well, that it's not 16, it already tells you that this can't be just one VRM. Yeah, because actually they incorporated some of the minor VRMs and made it look like it's one big vCore VRM. But actually, if we look at the power planes, it's not as easy to see. Yeah, it's kind of hard to see actually. The layers are not really that great. So, yeah. So if I remember correctly, looking at some overviews, these two phases should be SA and AIO. Then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 vCore phases, and then I guess the other 3 are for iGPU. Are those 3 phases? That might, yeah, there's a rather substantial iGPU looking, yeah. So I guess it's these 2 minor arrays and then 3 for iGPU. It might be 4 for iGPU and then just 1 minor array and the other one's like down here or something. It doesn't really matter that much. The vCore portion, that's the important bit that I know for a fact, is a 12 phase. Not really, because it's actually a 6x2. So, VRM components very similar to the Apex. This one's using Texas Instruments CSD87350s. These are 40 amp power packs, I think they're called. They're dual end FETs basically, but they are like a different, like a special package type from what I can see that only Texas Instruments has. So 40 amps, like exact same component that the Apex has. The Apex is an 8 phase, which is actually a 4x2. This is a 6x2, so 12. So you just have more of them, therefore stronger VRM. The Z170 XSoC4 as a LAN 2 has IR3553s, also 40 amps, but power stages. Those are proper power stages, and I think that one's also a true 8 phase and not a doubled 4. Yeah, current, in terms of current, the Gigabyte and Asus board are the same. This one is stronger than both of these. Yeah, for the doublers, they should be IR3598s again. See that? Should be IR3598s, right? Maybe IR3599s, but I think they should be 98s. And then for the controller, that's probably another IR35201. Yep. So, assuming the Asus board, because that's like another rebranded ASP EPU something controller, it's probably also an IR35201. So, all of the boards are on the same controller, but the Gigabyte boards had some power stages. Asus and AsRock chose dual end FETs. So, yeah, and in terms of VRM strength, like, yeah, it's fine. Like, these days you get more current per phase because you can get like 60, 70, even 120 amp power stages. I talk about this every single time. You're never gonna actually run that much current through that power stage because it will be horribly inefficient once you do that. Like 60 amp power stages, well, not really, but I think 50 and 40 amp are like, you can get pretty close to the maximum rating continuously. 60 amps maybe, but like 70 amps and above is like where it starts. Like, you can't run that current rating continuously through them because they will just get way too hot. And yeah. As for the output filter, so we have more CAN-type caps than most other boards, and we have this array of some SP caps and some multi-layer ceramics as well. So for the vCore VRM, this one's the best. This one's straight up the best. More phases, more current, better output filter. Like, this one has the best vCore VRM of all of them. I just think it doesn't really do that much. Like, CPUs, like, from what I've seen, I don't know it for a fact, I can't prove it, but from what I've seen, CPUs care a lot less about like output filters than GPUs do. Because I mean, yeah, CPUs pull less power, pull less current, there you go, that's probably why. Not the entire reason, but yeah. Of course, some extreme overclocking motherboards, like for example the Tachyon, I think Z490, and then later, and then also the Dark, or like the Dark Kingpin, or whatever it's called now. Yeah, those are very good output filters, and they do help. And yeah, this is also an overclocking motherboard, so it probably helps if you're doing like CPU-Z validations on LN2. For my purposes, it probably doesn't make a difference, because I'm not really planning to do any LN2 CPU overclocking. I do graphics card Sub-Zero. I just want a nice motherboard that's like, so the ambulance going by my house, thank you very much, person who just died. Yeah, what I want is a motherboard that's reliable, that has nice, some like very useful overclocking features such as like safe boots, memory retry, of course a postcode, CMOS clear like dual BIOS. Those are the kind of things that I like. Good SLI, like multi-GPU support. Good enough VRM, of course, to run my CPU well, and good memory clocks, because I want to eventually get a B-die kit, because like now where DDR5 is becoming more and more of a thing, I'm hoping to like get some cheap B-die to then put into my test bench, because that should give me a pretty nice boost for my 8700K, because right now I'm on a CJR kit. It's, from what I can tell, it's a pretty good CJR kit, but like it's still a CJR kit. So man, people really love stepping on the gas right next to my house. Wonderful. But yeah, so that's for the VRM. It's the better one. It's undeniably the best one. I just don't think it should be a very big part of my consideration which board to keep. And I think I should specify I can't keep the Gigabyte. That one's not mine. This selection is between the OC Formula and the Apex. And right now I'm kind of leaning towards the Apex. But I'm gonna give this a little bit more time to see which one I like. Again, we have the Gimmick extra 4-pin. Better than having 2 full 8-pins than the Apex. Yeah, the Apex. So the only CPU you could put in this that needs more than an 8-pin, potentially needs more than an 8-pin, is the 9900K. That's not even what this motherboard was made for. Like, it just so happens that it can mod this into accepting a 9900K. For anything that what this was made for, which is like 7700K, 6700K, you don't need more than an 8-pin. Ignore the extra 4. It's completely unnecessary. Rear I/O. Of course, we get another Ps2 port, this time a combo port, not 2 separate ones. This is for benchmarks like SuperPi, which run best on Windows XP, and Windows XP doesn't have good USB driver support. So using Ps2 peripherals is just kind of the best thing to do. Then to USB ports, a button that sadly doesn't really have it listed anywhere on the board what it does. And as I already said, I don't have a manual, so I can only guess what this does. It might be a CMOS clear button, it might be like a BIOS flashback button. Those are the kind of things you usually see in the rear I/O. It could be something else entirely. DisplayPort HDMI, so you can do APU overclocking or iGPU overclocking in this. USB-C, USB 3.05 of them. Gigabit, probably gigabit LAN, standard audio section, and then there's here this cutout, which is this is for oh, sorry. Another person died. I'm the next. This is what this is for. There's a little Wi-Fi add-on for this board. You plug this in. Like there's a version that is shown is open, and then you get like Wi-Fi connections in here. Then, of course, the exact same PCI Express slot spacing again, so you can run 4-way Crossfire or 2-way SLI. SLI only 2-way because it always wants at least 8x PCIe connections, and on a consumer level platform like Z170, you only get 2 slots with that. So you get a top slot that's either 16 or 8 lanes, this one which is either 8 or 4, this one which is these two which are only 4. So when you use all slots, this one's 8, and these are all 4, and if you use 2 cards, these are both 8, and well, this one's not active, and this one's, I think this one hangs off the chipset, so this is 4. And then you have like these 2 still, which are probably rather useless. Then you have 3 Ender 2 slots. Yeah, the Ender 2 slots, that's what they do. And then we get around to the overclocking section. So, we have power button, reset button, postcode, dual BIOS switch. This one has socketed BIOS chips, which is really, really nice. And a very nice, simple implementation of dual BIOS. You just have the switch, and you flip it, and it just selects one of the 2 BIOS chips. There's no like weird button that you have to press at a certain time, like on Asus, or like first you have to put it in a single BIOS mode, and then you have to select like on Gigabyte. This one's just the most straightforward implementation of dual BIOS. Just flip switch, different BIOS chip, flip back, first BIOS chip. Then we have a plus, minus, and menu button. I have no idea what this does. Again, I don't have a manual. It's probably either for BCLK or ratio, plus and minus, or maybe it's for both and the menu button switches between what it does. Then this is probably PCI Express slot enable or disable, so just like on the Apex and the Gigabyte board, you can disable your PCI Express slots, which is helpful for troubleshooting in multi-GPU setups, or for just getting single card scores in multi-GPU setups without having to actually swap away the card and like touch your setup. You can just keep running the same setup, just disable the PCI Express slot, and just pretend the second card isn't there. Then we have 3 more switches and a button, and those are actually labeled on the board. And now you can kind of see how filthy this thing is. Like, it doesn't look very great. It was very clearly in someone's PC who didn't take the best care of it. Anyway, so the left switch says LN2 mode 1. So yeah, this is pretty much like the same like the LN2 mode switch on the Gigabyte board or the RSVD switch on the Apex. This one's gonna like change some background settings in the BIOS to make your CPU run better Sub-Zero. It's gonna like get rid of cold bugs, maybe enhance overclocking capability a bit. It depends on what manufacturer, what board you have. They do slightly different things, but usually enabling, like you're supposed to enable them when you do Sub-Zero overclocking. Then we have slow mode 1, which is probably the same as like the also like the slow mode button on Asus, and then on Gigabyte also has one. I don't remember what they call it. This probably just sets the lowest CPU ratio. So like once you have things like SuperPi done running, you can enable this. Your CPU will go to the lowest like multiplier, and you're no longer at like the super high frequency, which could still crash even after the run is done. So you can take your screenshot in peace and don't have to worry about your system crashing when you do it. And then there's an XMP on switch. I don't entirely know what that means. Like, is that just a hardware switch for XMP? Or is that maybe for, because like that's a trick that I use, is the XMP profile also loads like some other things. It doesn't just load memory settings, it also loads like SAIO voltages. And sometimes I just don't want to mess around with those for a bit. So I just leave XMP enabled and just override the timings and the memory speed. Maybe this is meant for that, so it just kind of loads like some background settings that you don't want to adjust, but like this trick is a very basic thing, and I don't think extreme overclockers would need a function for that, especially because you can do it without a hardware switch. So I'm not entirely sure what that is for. And then we have this button, which I'm not entirely sure is labeled. There is like a little label in between here. Darkey 1? Is this like a direct to BIOS button? It could be a direct to BIOS button. So like you press this while the board is booting up, and you don't have to worry about like mashing delete or F2 while it's booting up. You just press that button and the board goes directly to BIOS. That could be what it is. I don't know what else it would be. Yeah. Then we get a lot of Sata ports, which is nice because the Apex only has 4, but like, I mean, I rarely use more than 2 SATA drives at the same time on a test bench, so it's not really that big of an issue. It's just, yeah, it's nice that it has a lot of SATA ports. 2 USB 3.0 ports and actually a physical, like actual USB 3.0 port over here. This is just a completely normal USB 3.0 port. This is just like the 2 USB ports that you also get on the Gigabyte board in about this area. It's just when you have it on a test bench, you're not going to use these front USB cables anyway, because it's a test bench. So if you just want some USB I/O in the front without having to go to the back, because the board's kind of meant to... Well, actually no, it's probably meant to have it like this, with the buttons facing you. But the Apex is meant to have it like this when you're sitting like here, because on the Apex everything is in this area, and on the Gigabyte board it's the same. So you have some front I/O without having to like go in the back of the board and plugging a USB stick in there, so you just plug a USB stick in there. And this might also be for BIOS flashback. This might be the port for BIOS flashback where just, you know, it might, I don't know for a fact if it has one, but it might have like a function where you can flash the BIOS without having to boot the board up. So it might be, this might be the USB port for that, but it also works as a completely normal USB port. Then the pretty much last thing would be, again, voltage read points for Brown, vCore, VCCIO, vGPU, VCCM, VCCSA, PCH 1.8 volt. That's the label. So yeah, just again a different style. Like Gigabyte gave you some little probe headers to plug in. Asus literally just gave you solder blobs where you have to solder on yourself. And this one, well, I don't know. I don't have all the original access. Like I got the original box, but it was a very minimal. Like not everything you get with the board was in it. So it might be that they give you something for this. It might not be. But yeah, you have voltage read points here. So pretty standard feature. Then actually I left something out. It also has debug LEDs. Yeah, you have the postcode. But yeah, if you don't know what a certain postcode means, you can look at this and it tells you what component that postcode is linked with if it like gets stuck somewhere. And then I also see this suspiciously I2C port looking thing. It says PWM CFG1. I don't know what CFG stands for, control something. But this looks like an I2C header, which we also have on the Asus board. I don't know if the Gigabyte board has it. It might have it. But basically, you can connect something like an Elma EVC to this and directly interface with the IR35201. And without having to go into the BIOS or installing any extra software, you could just directly talk to the controller and make it change your vCore or switching frequency or LOC or whatever you want on the fly. So it's a pretty cool thing to do. It's not a must do, but it's nice that they give you this very convenient hookup spot. You just have to solder a header to that, then you can connect your EVC and you're basically good to go. And yeah, that is basically it for the overview of the board. Yeah, should have gone through all the features of the board. And yeah, so now I can talk a little bit more about some specifics. The first thing I want to talk about is that this was the more expensive board of the two that I got. Far more expensive board of the two I got. And I'm kind of disappointed because the socket of this came actually broken. So it was advertised as working, and it was shipped without any protection on the socket, so I guess I know why the pins were bent. But yeah, this came with 2 bent pins. And sometimes you can luck out, and the bent pins are just like ground or VCC, and them being bent doesn't do anything. But sadly, in this case, it made the left memory channel not work. So whenever you had a stick in the left memory channel, it would boot loop or like just get stuck and not be able to post. You would only be able to post with that memory stick in the right channel. Thankfully, I was able to fix that. I bent both the pins back. One was in about this area, the other one was about in this area. I was able to, well, I don't know if I bent both of them back, but both memory channels work now. So I'm gonna call it fixed. yeah, so I'm a bit disappointed with the state of the board. Like, I paid a lot more for this than for, like, okay, the Apex was a very good deal because it was effectively free. But I paid so much more for this, and it comes with a messed up socket. It comes like looking all filthy. Actually, this one was never peeled. Let's do that real quick. Let's get that peel feel. Yeah. So at least we have 2 clean areas on the board now. Yeah. But yeah, I'm a bit disappointed with the board is kind of filthy. And I mean, a graphics card I would just wash. Motherboards, I'm a bit, yeah, because the socket's very sensitive and there's a lot more things that water can creep into on a motherboard. Like graphics cards, I'm not really concerned about washing because I did it all the time. I never had a card die on me with that because just dry them properly and they work. I have washed one motherboard after like I got some corrosion on the PCI Express switches after running Sub-Zero for the first time. That was the Z370 Aeros Gaming 5. And yeah, the PCI Express slot stopped working. Then I washed it, then it worked again. And then ever so often, periodically, they would stop working again. That's one of the reasons why I want a new test bench motherboard. Yeah, so I don't really want to wash the board, even though it looks kind of filthy. Even is a bit sticky. Also, the minus a menu button, like the menu button still sounds okay, but the travel isn't good. The minus button is just basically dead. Then the plus button works properly, and these also work properly. These two, like, yeah, they're filthed up, they don't really work anymore. So, state of the board is not that great. Like, it still works, I guess, but the state's not great. Yeah. And then the pretty much last thing is, so if I consider to keep this one over the Apex, of course, I'm gonna have to mod it for Coffee Lake. And the Super I/O chip should be this one here. It's actually on the back on this one. And sadly, it's not the case like on the Z170M OC formula. So there's an ATX of this board, which is actually a 2-dimmer, but it's pretty rare. And like basically not, like I was looking for it, couldn't find one in the country. I found one in Russia and for way too much money, and no, I'm not doing that. So yeah, so I got this instead. And yeah, I mean, we'll see about the memory overclocking. So far, the one thing it has going for it is locked CPU overclocking, and yeah, it has a better VRM. In basically everything else, I like the Apex more. Well, okay, the one thing this one does better is like, because of the way how I have my test bench set up, like I have the boards like this, because I, like my phase change comes out from under the desk and onto my GPU from there. So I can't have the motherboard angled like this, I have to angle it that way. So I can reach these buttons easier than on the Apex, but I mean, I have external buttons on my test bench anyway, so it's not really a thing. I guess the postcode's in a more easy to read spot than on the Apex, because on the Apex it's up here. But that's just really nitpicking. The things it has going for it is locked CPU overclocking and the rather inconsequential VRM upgrade. The Apex has better overclocking buttons. Of course, it's a 2-dimmer. So far, it seems stronger on the memory, even though it's not as strong as I would have liked. I kind of visually like the Apex more, even though it's just a gray board. If instead of yellow, this was orange or like blue, then I would like this more. I just really don't like yellow. Yellow is like the one color that I despise the most. I don't know why. I just don't like yellow. It reminds me of the thing that goes into the toilet. So yeah, I don't like yellow. So if they could have done gold. With gold, it would have been okay. but please not yellow. So anyway, so that's why I kind of like the Apex more, even though the Apex is just like this very generic gray, which I actually kind of don't like. Like, the best color scheme is the Gigabyte, but again, I can't keep that because it's not mine. I just have it right now because I haven't been told to ship it yet, and yeah. Yeah, so it's not looking too great for the OC formula. It's just, I have it and I can test it. At least, if I decide to get rid of this again, at least I tested it once, so I gave it a chance. And as for Coffee Lake modding, so the OCM formula, the MATX one, actually has just a pad around this area that just gives you the socket occupied pin. It doesn't seem like this one has it. I tried looking for it. It might still be somewhere, but I couldn't find it. So yeah, I mean, I would just have to look up the datasheet for the Super.io chip and then find the socket occupied pin myself. And then there's the thing of potential pad isolation. So people say that on AsRock boards you need to isolate 2 pins on the CPU. Now Lumi said that he didn't do that and his CPUs and boards were fine, though he had the MATX version of this board. And there is a slight chance that there are different socket pinouts between the MATX and the full ATX OC formula. It's a very slim chance, but there's a chance, and I'm not risking my 8700K for that. So I would have to isolate 2 pads, which is better than the like 20 or so pads you have to isolate on a Gigabyte board, but still I would have to isolate some pads. And yeah, that's why I'm probably just gonna test with the G13900 first. Because I know the G13900 does fine for clock. Like, I tested it in the Gigabyte and I did 3866 there, so I know the IMC can at least do that. Yeah, so like basically the only way how I keep this over the Apex is if this does like much better memory suddenly, if I give it more time. Otherwise I'm probably gonna keep the Apex. Yeah, that's pretty much it. But if I keep this, yeah, I would have to like short the OC's like socket occupied pin and then maybe isolate those pads, and then, well, it will work. Then I would have an OC formula for my test bench. Yeah, so so either this one's just much better than the Apex on memory clock, which I kind of doubt, because it's a 4 dimmer versus a 2 dimmer, and the Apex is a bit newer, so there might be some optimizations there that they had from Z170. Yeah, the one thing that I might do, I would have to find the money. So I would have to find the money to keep this board and not sell it, because I can't really afford having both of them. It doesn't really make sense having both of them though. The one thing I might decide to keep this around for is like getting more locked CPUs to overclock with. I do want to try overclocking the G13900 with this. I saw that someone had a Z170, like it has to be a Z170. I don't think any Z270 boards do this. If the Apex does locked CPU overclocking, then yeah, I'm yanking this. But as far as I know, only Z170 boards can do locked CPU overclocking. So that's like the one thing that I might decide to keep both boards. But again, I would have to find a way to pay for that. And if I don't, yeah. Yeah, that's the thing basically. And I think that would be it for the video. So, yeah, I mean, the OC formula is a nice board. I probably made it sound a little bit like it's not that great, but it is a nice board. It's just not a 2 dimmer, and the Apex happens to have like a few more extra functions that I appreciate. And yeah, like, other than that, it's a very solid motherboard. Like, don't get me wrong. I actually heard from some people that this is the best starter motherboard. Like this plus a 7700K or something is supposed to be like the best starter kit for like building a first test bench for like GPU overclocking. because this thing can do a lot of things. Like AsRock has done some really cool things with the BIOS of this one. There's a lot of cool functions that it has that I'm gonna try to test out, like among them locked CPU overclocking. I think AsRock also officially kept supporting this through the ages, so like maybe just flashing a newer BIOS onto this is gonna improve the memory overclocking a ton. Because as far as I know, they kept optimizing it even after Coffee Lake came out. Because like they knew that people were using this for overclocking. Because like Coffee Lake didn't have that many great overclocking boards actually, at least none that were publicly available. So yeah, we'll see. I'm gonna give this a good test, just like the Apex, and then at some point I'll decide which one to make my new standard test bench board. Until then, I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Maybe you learned something. And until next time, goodbye.